Welcome to Hochoka Podcast.
Today, childhood trauma is our most urgent public health issue. What can we do about it? Hello, Matakiepi, and welcome to Hochoka here at the center of St. Joseph's Indian School campus. I'm your Hochoka host today, Scott Wooster. We're glad you've joined our circle for part one of a three-part series, which we call Here Comes Everyone. This series speaks to everyone involved in a child's care environment: teachers, house parents, guardians, and really anyone who has a supporting role regarding the essential needs of a growing child. Today we talk with Mark Fredo, who needs very little introduction to those who are watching today. He's a previous guest on Hochoka. He's the founder of Growing Edge Training, and he's been an essential partner to St. Joseph's Indian School for many years. He supports our implementation of the LSCI, or the Life Space Crisis Intervention, which is a strength-based approach to working with behaviors as opportunities for growth and for learning. And so, Mark, welcome to Hochoka today.
We're going to begin this three-part series, and it's a conversation based around the work of a couple of guys, Howard Bath and John Seda, called The Three Pillars of Transforming Care: Trauma and Resilience in the Other 23 Hours, correct?
Yes.
Can you briefly just talk a little bit about Howard and John and who those two guys are?
Sure. Howard and John are longtime colleagues through my work with Reclaiming Youth International and now Reclaiming Youth at Risk. John actually has a long history with Larry Brentro, and as he was a hurt kid, he came from a problematic, troubled youth and was in and out of various foster homes and other organizations as a child. And his life settled and changed when he became a student at Star Commonwealth, where he met Larry Brentro and other key staff who were really significant in his development and his success. John went on to work in the field, actually got his PhD from Western Michigan University, and became a professor at Michigan State University in the area of social work.
Okay. And Howard Bath?
Howard also goes way back through our Reclaiming Youth work together. Howard had an interesting childhood himself. He was the child of missionaries and through the Salvation Army, and he spent a good bit of his youth in boarding schools in India.
Okay.
And later on, he got his education and furthered his education with a doctorate at the University of Washington. And so he has a good bit of time, in the States. And then he went back to Australia, where he came from, and has done a variety of work in Thomas Wright Training Institute, various other organizations. He was the first commissioner of children's services in the Northern Territories of Australia a number of years ago. And now he does his work as a trainer consultant through Alambi Care, based in Newcastle, Australia.
Okay. So when we knew you were coming to Hochoka to be on the podcast here, when we were invited you here, you suggested that we talk about this topic, which I think is fascinating, and I got a chance to read the book too, and it focuses not only on therapy, but it also focuses on, we talked about it before, engagement, but it focuses on thoughtful engagement with children and young people as they find their way in this world, as they live, they learn, they play. It feels like it was the book, as I read it, I thought it's almost kind of made for the school here. Can you speak to that?
Well, the book itself was written with practitioners in mind, direct care practitioners, and not other psychologists or sort of highly educated, degreed or certified people. Most of people in those realms have a good sense of this or continue to learn about this. When Howard and John conceived of this. The idea was to provide this sort of training for the people in direct care, the people who are the sort of the regular people, the backbone, the front line, if you will, of work with young people.
Okay, which would make it a perfect fit for our teachers here, our house parents,
Absolutely.
our folks who are working directly with them. Today we'll tackle the safety pillar. So there's 3 pillars we've talked about, and the first one is the safety pillar, which if you feel safe, it's the most important aspect of mental health. Can you explain that a little in more detail to our listeners?
Absolutely. Safety is really fundamental. Our brains operate like they develop, from the bottom up and the back to the front. And at the core is our brain's primary function is to keep us alive. And a corollary is to keep us safe. So we have a part of our brain, the amygdala, which we refer to as like the guard dog of our brain, that becomes alarmed and alert when adversity or traumatic experiences are going on, and that begins in our earliest years. Young people who've experienced a lot of adversity, a lot of trauma, get what we might refer to as an overactive amygdala. So they become hypersensitized to things that are, frightening or threatening, things even before language, where they don't have a sense of safety because of, certain stimuli in the environment. And felt safety really synthesizes it all down to the most important thing. It's very individual, it's very personal. And if you feel safe, then you can be engaged in other things around you. If you don't feel safe, safety is primary, it's distracting from other things, relationships, education, work, sort of living life successfully or effectively. And so Dr. Purvis talked about felt safety as the core of this. And it really had an influence on me and my work. And JC and I talked about this a lot as we developed Kid Whispering, and it certainly was sensitive to John and to Howard as well. So what it did for me was, now when I talk to kids, I didn't used to do this, but now when I talk to kids, I always ask, do you feel safe? Do you feel safe here? And the good news, in my experience, is many times kids will say yes, or they'll say, I don't know, which I always lean towards yes. So when I ask them, do you feel safe here? You feel safe personally. What about this helps you feel safe? They always respond in significant or key ways, certain ways. They respond with the name of a person or people. It's relational safety. These kids never refer to the policies and procedures manual. They never, worry about what license is on the wall. Do you feel safe? It's relational safety. And then I ask, what about these people, this person or these people? What do they do to help you feel safe? Overwhelmingly, the response is they listen. They listen. Being listened to, being attended to, is the most important thing. So we really try to be mindful of, having kids have a sense of safety, and it has to happen on their terms. I could say to a kid, well, I'm really safe. You don't have to worry about it. You're safe with me. And, any reasonable kid's going to say, they all say that to me. They've heard this before. So really what we understand is it's the young person's experience that helps them feel safe. And so felt safety is where it all begins. Having that sense of safety allows us to engage. It allows us to explore further. It minimizes some of the risk. So being able to feel safe is key. And so it's certainly the first pillar in transforming care, because it's very foundational and important to all of us. And it's not just kids.
Right.
All of us have to have a sense of safety.
When we look at creating a culture of safety here at St. Joe's, or creating it any other way, any other place, what are critical ideas in a child's environment that staff and other students would need to do to address that safety?
Well, what we really want to pay attention to in terms of safety is for kids to have a sense of physical safety. Having kids be safe, it actually is part of our policies and procedures in every place we go. So while kids may not think about that, it's certainly important to us. And so we want to make sure that we're creating an environment that allows for adequate supervision, that allows for opportunities for kids to, express, physical concerns, whether it be, health or bullying or, somehow being threatened, so that, they have somebody there to help mitigate it. We also have a beautiful campus here where, lots of things are set up to allow their physical safety. And so they get outside a lot, and they're able to play, and they're able to engage in the equine therapy and other things. So there's a lot of things that are set up in this program and other programs that care for kids that really do attend to the physical safety to make sure that things are in working order and all of that. So that's sort of things that we can sort of take for granted, but we really have to think about it from the lens of a kid. What does it look like and feel like to them? That's important. Another aspect of safety that we will be concerned about is emotional safety. And emotional safety is more intimate. Emotional safety has to do with that sense of, do I feel safe? And, in order to create that, there has to be opportunities for input and outlets for expression. So we have people here who are attentive to kids. In all programs that care for kids well, people are paying attention to the kids and being mindful of their various kinds of expressions of emotion, whether it be fear or depression or anger or whatever, and can interact and can question and provide support, but also providing opportunities for kids to be able to express their emotions. And sometimes kids express their emotions not by sitting down and saying, let me tell you how I feel. Sometimes they express their emotions by acting out. And we have to understand that that is not just behavior, it's expression. And many times that expression is emotional. And so we have to be aware of and attentive to the fact that kids are having an emotional experience here. And so being aware of and sensitive to that and providing them opportunities to talk. And sometimes kids don't do that for a while. Sometimes kids have a hard time getting to the place where they're willing to share because it's risk and they can become vulnerable. So kids have to be safe to be vulnerable in the presence of caring adults in their setting. And so we also talk about relational safety. And the relational safety is just a corollary of the other two, being able to know that there are people here with whom I feel safe. There are people here that I know will listen to me. There are people here who will let me express in a way I need to express. And sometimes that means for adults not getting hung up on language. Not getting hung up on the expression of emotion. Relational safety sometimes means accepting the presence of a kid in the condition that they're in, and just being able to understand and respect that there's really important things going on here that we need to understand. Another piece is cultural safety, and now that's certainly true everywhere. It's especially true at St. Joe's Indian School. You have, kids coming from Native families and Native communities from all around, and the whole idea is to understand and respect that culture as much as possible and allow kids to express things in culturally appropriate ways. This is true in every other place. In fact, it's more clear here. That need is more clear here than it is in other places where, kids come from, various kinds of backgrounds, and culture isn't as clear or distinct in terms of just a general understanding. And so and in places where programs serve.
Do you have, when it comes to safety, do you have a good real life example or a story that deals with safety? Maybe a child finding that safety is their first pillar.
Oh gosh, so many examples. One had to do with a young person in a school setting that that was, very reactive because they didn't feel safe and they didn't trust. And what happens with a particular teacher over time who was more tolerant of the kind of reactive behavior that a young person who fears might have, who didn't send the kid out, who didn't want to punish the kid, who just paid attention to the kid over time and letting those expressions happen. And to reflecting back, it really seems like you're really frightened about something. It seems that you're frightened, and a kid might deny, no, I'm not afraid of anything or whatever. But that tolerance of letting the kid express over time and reflecting back, being able to talk with kids, and it's not to be blunt or stark, but to just reflect back. Here's what it looks like, or here's what it sounds like, or here's what it seems like, to give the kid a chance to say, no, here's what it is, and eventually, over time, and time is sort of relative. In this particular case, it took considerable time for the kid to talk about, I'm afraid of adults. I'm afraid adults are going to leave me. Adults are going to hurt me. And to just be able to express that and then have the context that's already been going on of an adult not just putting up with them, but engaging them and to be and to invite them to feel safe and tell me how we can do things to help you feel safe.
Yeah.
And once kids have that sense of safety, things open up.
Yeah.
And when things open up in a school setting, they're going to be much more able to attend to the learning assignments, and begin to develop a sense of themselves as a learner, and to be able to socialize with other young people. And that would be true in any setting for kids whose primary challenge is, I don't feel safe.
In terms of cultural safety, if you're somebody who's practiced traditional culture at home and you send your kid here, you want to know that they've got that safety to be a part of that here. And also the flip side of that is the opportunity to not do that if you don't want to do that too, because there's a continuum of, everybody's got their place on that continuum. You might be real traditional, you might not be at all, and just because it's now accepted here doesn't mean that you want your kid involved in it, and you might fall in the middle of the spectrum. So that cultural piece is a big piece, and you alluded to it, that at St. Joe's it's going to be a big deal.
Absolutely.
So Mark, one thing that I've heard you talk about is that where trauma ends, shame begins. Can you tell me a little bit about that, what you mean by that?
Well, absolutely. When JC and I were putting Kid Whispering together, we also realized that we sort of misstated that, because trauma really never ends. But when the experience of trauma happens, and even as it gets mitigated and may be diminished through healthy experiences, the sense of shame that sometimes exists, it continues, and it's very hard to deal with. Now, again, shame is a normal experience. Everybody experiences shame, and if people watching this just take a few seconds and think about an experience of shame that they've had, it's not hard to come up with those kind of experiences. For most of us, though, in sort of normal, healthy living, the shame experience has a beginning, a middle, and an end. We can learn from it. Shame can actually be a motivating force in our life. But for the most part, it's very heavy, and it's very difficult to deal with. And in our work with young people, what we find is that shame is talked about very little. The experience of shame, the heaviness of shame, the implications of shame, and sometimes how that becomes part of the catalyst for the kind of reactions that we see happening in kids. So it's important that we understand that shame does exist, that it's normal, it's found in everybody's life. For some kids, it's not episodic, though. See, for some kids, the experience of shame isn't episodic, having a beginning, middle, and an end. It's ongoing. So imagine what that would be like, because for us, when we experience shame, it's painful, and it's hurtful, and it's sometimes frightening. And we grow through that, get past that. But we have young people for whom shame is a more constant experience. And I think we really have to be able to understand how that contributes to the kind of pain they experience, and how that can be addressed. Again, helping them feel safe enough to be able to talk about that, or to talk about events and the corollary implications of shame that is in their life. Because I don't think a lot of adults don't actually talk with kids about shame or ask about it. So, Jay and I believe that, it's an important and powerful experience in the life of kids. And when it's ongoing, it probably is attached to toxic stress or complex trauma, the ongoing existence of those adversities or traumas over time. And so it really is a significant contributor to the experience of kids. And we want to make sure that we mention it, and that we can really talk about how, through the approaches that we take, can understand and help kids deal with the implications and hopefully grow through shame.
Mark, thank you for joining us today in Hochoka at the center of St. Joseph's Indian School campus, where we talk about issues that are central to Native American education today. Until next time, stay centered.